Heidi, I'm Chris from Airwindows. Let me get my light. I'm Chris from Airwindows with an extra light. And we're doing another little check-in. And turns out it's an important check-in because of something I talked about last week, which I am not able to deliver, but maybe I'll get up to that this coming weekend. See, my idea was to do the new release of Airwindows Meter this coming weekend. And I had said when I was working on this stuff that, oh yeah, I'll like upload it onto the GitHub, and I never did because too much was happening. So let me show you a little what I mean about that. Too much happening. Here is a set of different songs that have been ordered by versions of Airwindows Meter. And also here is yet another piece of information, but I'll get to that. So, the one in white, file names text, is old school. It's what you've got as far as Airwindows Meter is concerned. And don't mind me, I'm making a cup of herbal tea. This is not coffee. This is a day when I was up grinding away at 6 o'clock in the morning without coffee because ideas were happening and I needed to try to pursue them. Well, what you see in white there is the original Airwindows Meter, the one that you have available to you. And you can see that it is organized in order of loudness, basically. That's what that gives you. You got the Beatles, a couple of tracks, are the loudest tracks I had available. Ozzy's Crazy Train gets really loud in the solo section. You've got more Beatles, you've got several Yes tracks, Judas Priest, U2, XTC, more Yes tracks, more Beatles, Bowie. Interestingly, some of these have other characteristics going on as well. For instance, Bowie's Heroes is very static. It doesn't change, it's just a series of drones. And I'm not sure that's in line with what I'm trying to do with trying to find a use for peak music. So look over here. It says last batch. Here's where we're at right now. You see that there's now 3 different ratings instead of just 1. That's because the one all the way over on the right is essentially the original loudness reading. Then the one next to it, where all the ones up in the top are saying AA, AA, AC, AA, AA, AB. Notice that Burial is way the heck up there. And Devo, weirdly. And more Beatles, Beastie Boys, Captain Beefheart, more Beatles, more Burial, a Robert Palmer track out of nowhere. And that second measurement is something I was working on in Meter since last week. By the way, if anybody wants to chat in the chat, I've set it to be working live chat, so that will show me that that's working. YouTube gave me some kind of weird announcement having to do with moderation. So for all I know, everybody is permanently moderated now and nobody gets to speak. I'll find out. Anyways, there's 3 readings there. So let's see. First we will close BB Edit. And here's the thing we're currently looking at. Note that I have measured 482 songs since last week. Since I went and started redoing this, I have done 482 songs. There's about 600 or so left. And what these measurements do is the loudness one is all the way on the right, so it's not going to sort by that. The Mac Finder isn't going to sort by that. Then the one next to it is something I was working on, and it has to do with dividing, and I might have been talking about this last week. I may have. By the way, give me a second. I think it's time to take my tea bag out and put some stevia in there, and then I'll have my tea, and I'll be right back. Hey, I'm back. I am definitely a little puzzled. Somebody says something in chat so that I can know that it works. I am puzzled as to nobody saying hi, and it makes me wonder whether it's broken. Or indeed, maybe chat is like broken or off or something. That's weird. Have I got it disabled? Don't mind me, I'm fooling with this stuff. I feel like I would like people to be able to chat back, and I don't know whether I accidentally turned it off without meaning to. Live reactions, message delay, redirects, monetization off, thank you. That's just annoying. Doesn't really pay you anything anyway, so who cares? Oh, okay. Somebody has spoken in chat. Hello. So now I know it works, although it's possible setting it to live chat made it be broken, in which case I will just not do that. Back to the window we were looking at. So check this out. This is not only measuring loudness, it is also measuring the peaks in the, maybe I can show you this. Give me a second. A Frank Zappa track. The effect stack that will not pass it through to the audio. And here's what we've currently got, although I'm going to hide bits of this because we haven't gotten to it yet. So what you see here is how Airwindows meter works. You'll notice I've got the wiggly lines down here in their own space now. These little dots are peaks, and the gray area is RMS loudness. RMS is pretty much the only thing people care about these days, but peaks are the most important thing, and I'll seek to demonstrate that. This is the slew section. It's now labeled. See RMS and peak at the top, dB markings for these lines. There would be markings for these lines too, and I put them in and Juice would not display them. It broke. I don't know why it broke. But what we're looking at is the way in which peaks are drawn onto the picture. And this is how we measure. So what's going on here, and what Airwindows meter is about, is being able to do stuff with these dots. These dots are the peaks that you normally limit away and make everything as loud as possible, but they do important things. And so here's how the important things work. You can also see this in the second one, slew, which is doing the same, like it's drawing them in different positions. If you had no gray area, you would have only a sort of cloud of peaks kind of waving up and down, and then you wouldn't actually care about the RMS volume if you're only looking at the peaks. Well, that's basically what we're doing. I wrote code to take all of these peaks, right? And you see how these ones are up around minus 6 dB, and then as it gets quieter, the peaks go down to about minus 18 dB. They don't necessarily go that much lower than that. Well, I divvied that up into what you call bins, much like FFT audio processing divides frequencies up into bins. This is dividing loudnesses up into bins, peak loudnesses. And what it does is it has, like, think of it like a little player piano from the top to the bottom of this top meter. You could also imagine it as any of these other meters for all the difference it would make. And when you have a peak showing up, like this one here that's drawn in a large blue spot, that pings the bin that it falls into, and that bin then kind of sustains a little bit. And in order to get another kind of score, what I'm calling peak fluctuations, you let the bins be sounded by these peaks hitting them. And the harder they're hit, like with the blue dots, the longer they'll sustain, but they get pinged even by the quietest of dots. And then you basically count the bins that are active. So you know what's going to happen with that is, and I'm going to go and pick something more appropriate. Like, let me find something good and loud, because we're going to talk about what this is doing here as well. ECDC done by Muttlange does not qualify. However, I can probably find, yeah. So Old Yes off of the album Time in a Word is very loud. So we're going to see something when we open this up and run it a bit. It's going to get going, and then when they're playing loud, this is not even the best example either. Stop, stop, stop. Thank you. What's going to be good? I'd better go look for something that's really, really loud. Hopefully they didn't just invalidate my whole live stream on the back of that. It's a risk. What have we got that's really loud? Because this is now organized in a completely different way. And I'm trying to explain it because this is my checking in stream. And it will explain why I may very well throw away all of this work and start over. So let's talk about that a little bit. I am desperately trying to find something super loud. Kinks get there a little bit. Actually, the Kinks have another quality, which is this is a very 60s track. This is off of Village Green Preservation Society, so it's not that loud, but it's rather distorted. And there's other, but it's hard for me to find things in this list. There's other even more distorted tracks, but this is what you can get when you're doing like a really 60s kind of sound. What we see here is the band is going, their loudness is kind of sneaking up there. They go into the chorus. RMS loudness is almost up to minus 12 dB. And you notice that all of these spots, the blue spots, those are all sitting up here. So if you take away the RMS that's getting in the way of where the peaks sit, and you divide this into bins, I'll scooch it down a little bit more. This narrow band is triggering bins to light up and then gradually dissipate. Everything down here is not getting touched at all. And the purpose of arranging for being able to measure fluctuations in the peak energy is to try to find when bands and musicians are taking advantage of dynamic range or changing the texture of the sound. Now, this might be kind of go and do a bunch of progressive rock style stuff, and I won't lie, I do like that kind of thing. But I'm really interested in what happens when, like, maybe your groove covers a wider range. Because there's a lot of different kinds of music that have been really popular and successful, and you can't just only go by loudness, even peak loudness. So that's where we got so far, is the middle section of this is tracking which bins are being lit up, and then at any given moment it's counting how many of them are still active. So if you go super loud and all of your peaks are like lighting up like this, and they're up here in the loudest part of the sound, everything down here is now silent, to the point where if the volume drops, that can register as a raise in novelty. And I suppose I could also call this peak novelty, but I've got descriptions. These are the original descriptions, more or less, of the loudness section. And then these are new descriptions having to do with how novel the pattern of peak energy is. Is it just sitting in the same place? Is it changing? Is it doing anything? I know you can't. I'm hiding that for now. And so I've got this list, and then I went and compensated for the loudness. See, what I did was I measured by novelty, but then I organized it by subtracting the a factor of how loud it was, so that quiet stuff could get a look in, so that you'd only have like things wouldn't get overwhelmed by just what is louder. And so this first category here is now measuring loudness compensated variety. And you see that I have a different list of things, and it's interesting what shows up when you do that. It's a little more like what I'm interested in doing. Notice you've got Beatles, we've got Burial, a Devo track shows up randomly, Beastie Boys shows up, Captain Beefheart, a Robert Palmer track again, B-52s right up at the top, Boards of Canada. Steely Dan's Asia is much quieter than anything else, and yet it shows up big time. Black Sabbath, Rat Salad is almost, it's the drum solo. But Bill Ward on drums plays drums so interestingly that the texture of the changing, it's modulating the bends of the peak energy tracker, and he's making different textures in sound, and it jumps right up to the, we've got James Brown. Whoever heard of James Brown showing up in one of these lists this high up? His loudness is only at DA. But there is so much drama, there is so much dynamics. This is actually one of the older tracks. And what that one looks like is it goes quite loud. It's an old 60s track. Like I can content hide it. It's not even good, James Brown. But one thing it does is the voice is incredibly loud. And that's a trick that you can use for hit record style sound. Because what it's doing is when the voice kicks in, the pattern of peaks is completely different than it was before. Those big dark gray spots are where he sings. And so now I have a hit record meter where James Brown is showing up AA rated. Yes, it's Astral Traveler, Ace of Base. That's CD sourced. And it is not the loudest thing in the world, but there is a great deal of variety in that old original Chiron, original Max Martin style sound. We got old Kinks. Harry Rag is actually the thing I was thinking of as it tries to rename it. Where if it's such a loud track that it just kind of blares away loudly, and everything is kind of so saturated that it's throwing lots of heavily saturated, loud-sounding peaks everywhere. And there you are, and it's low frequencies in the zero cross section, and the slew section is producing something interesting, and the meters are doing the thing where that red line is the fluctuations, is the novelty. The green line becomes what used to mean green sections of the blue line. That's going to be your hit record quality. That's what's in the rating in the corner. And we see as we continue looking through there, we've got Elton John. We've got a Zappa from 1971, which is amazing. Peter Gabriel, big time. Creighton, Suzy Q, Chic, Le Freak. I am completely thrilled to see Chic in Parliament showing up because those bands changed the world. They should register on this. It's not right to have like loud rock tracks be the only thing that matters when bands like that changed everything. You got old Beatles, No Reply. That's a very loud, penetrating sound. Like pre-Rubber Soul. We got Black Sabbath again. Strangely, Cat Stevens' Moonshadow shows up. Rolling Stones, Beast of Burden. Another Ace of Base. It's doing a really good job now. We got Chuck Berry's Maybelline of finding stuff where there's a lot of variety and interestingness. Like here we have David Bowie's Changes. That's a classic track. One of my favorites, Devo's Blockhead. Just B-52's Planet Claire. This is still in the A tier. Steely Dan's showing up as well. Prince, When Doves Cry. Beastie Boys again. Dead Mouse shows up. We go all the way to the bottom of this 482 tracks, and we've got other stuff, but we've got stuff that tends to be more legato. The Beatles, It's All Too Much. It's incredibly loud, but is it really a hit record? It kind of makes people turn it off, and that's because there's almost no variety in it. The variety of it is like rated DC, where you're looking for much more interesting stuff going on. Free Bird is also way the heck down here because it's very legato. It doesn't change very much. Several U2 tracks. Dead Kennedys tracks show up down here where before they were dominating everything, and it's because sometimes they don't have a lot of variety in them. You know, Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows. It's an amazing track on a number of fronts, but you don't really usually put it on and just listen to it. It just kind of drones on. Dr. Robert, not a hit in the way that something like Taxman was, and I bet I can find Beatles' Taxman higher up if I look. Don't worry, we're not going to do this all the way until 5, because again, I'm going to need to throw all of this away, and I'll show you why. First, let's see now. Go down a little farther. Still looking for Beatles. Day Tripper is BD. Now, Fleetwood Mac's Dreams is a loudness of DC, but it goes all the way up to BD in this new arrangement where it's been compensated by the loudness. But here's the thing. I didn't want to stop there. I've got this. This is little notes that I made. Because you know how I've got those spots on the slew meter, and they can show as red if it's brighter than optimum, blue if it's optimum, and green if it's darker than optimum? I thought, why not measure that? Why not measure that and have it in a new section of the meter? Which it is. So I measured all of this stuff and all of this stuff, just exploring what this would mean, because this didn't exist when I named all of these and set up my little 3 things to measure them by and sorted them by the optimized thing. So here we've got Down Under by Men at Work is 27 bright, 57 loud, and 15 dark. New Frontier by Donald Fagen, well, that's 17 bright, 50 loud, 32 dark. So that's got more dark sounds. Then we've got Waiting/Jesus, Waiting for the Bus, and Jesus Just Left Chicago off of ZZ Top's Tres Hombres album on vinyl original mix. That does 0 bright, 0 bright, 36 loud, 62 dark. They remixed that in the 80s just because they weren't able to sit with what it was. And we've got more examples of things like that. For instance, Steely Dan's Deacon Blues, 3 bright, 33 loud, 63 dark. What happens when you get this stuff together, and now you're going to see what's been added when I put the display on anyhow. And you have the record score in the corner as before, but now we've got measuring peak fluctuations, measuring peak loudness, just so that you can see what they're doing. And peak tone, 0% bright, 0% loud, 100% dark because it's completely quiet right now. And then, with all of these new markings, When we hit play, it starts to come into focus, and the novelty jumps right up as it goes. Loudness does not, because this is an old Ace of Base track, which is not especially loud, although it is clipping. It's just one of those 80s tracks that's incredibly dynamic. You can see bright 16%, loud 48%, dark 33%. What might you do with that? Well, I decided that it would be interesting to change the meter around so that it was still trying to subtract the loudness and compensate somewhat for stuff just winning by being incredibly loud. But maybe not as much. I dialed it back. I dialed it back to the golden ratio just to see. And then this peak tone here can be another subtraction. What you do is you measure bright versus dark, and it is absolute value of bright minus dark, and then you subtract that. What you get is, if the sound is just extraordinarily loud, if it doesn't have bright and dark pretty much at all, it's just a blaring noise, well, that doesn't subtract very much, because it's like, okay, this is rocking out super hard. If it's a more wide range track, if it's one of these 80s tracks or post 80s tracks where you have brightness, where you have bass, where you have stuff like, electronic deadmau5 mixes, stuff like that, and it's pushing a lot of energy into high and low frequencies rather than just only going for sonority, do they balance? And you can see, excuse me, you can see that in this one, it's like 32 minus 19 gives you a small number, which you then subtract from the high score that you got, and it gets it to a BB rating. Let's find something else. Let's find something that'll be amusing and is not too long. As I'm looking like mad for what might work here. Oh, well, this would be fairly quick. One of my high scores. This is the Beatles' Lovely Rita. Sgt. Pepper's surely counts as hit record, if anything does. Well, as it kicks in, you'll see that it ends up with almost everything in loud, and it ends with 4 bright and 7 dark. There's almost nothing out of balance there. And as you see, it has already nailed the AA score. The meter is able to tell already that it is an enormous hit song, which it is. But the meter doesn't know what a song is. It's only looking at patterns of sound. And then if you stop it here, we've already gotten to hit record high score here. You can see that its peak fluctuations are rated as AC, startling, and peak loudness, BD, strong. And that is consistent with what we see as it behaves. The fluctuations are partly because it started out with that big, airy, reverby, like, ah, and it's filling up a bunch of space, and then it slams into the loud section. This area, which wasn't getting much attention, suddenly gets lots of attention, and this stuff is still sticking around. And so it goes boom. You see where it goes to hit record section is they start singing, and you just know. That's what listening to hit records can be like, is it doesn't take much time to just know. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to continue to listen to this. And this is how it's done. This is how that effect transpires. Let's fire up another one that I know is going to score well. Rolling Stones, Beast of Burden. Doesn't start as fast as the other ones. But you'll notice that the peak tone here, it's leaning a little bit on bright, partly because of surface noise. But it's still producing dark sound as well, these green dots here. And if you were trying to dial that stuff in, you'd be able to go and find where to turn stuff up or down. Like you turn the highs down if you were leaning too heavily on brightness. Or, I don't know, turn up the bass or the kick drum if there's not enough dark. And you probably want to have some of the bright and the dark, as well as the ones that just come across as loud. I'm looking to see whether I have this showing up anywhere. I have an interesting example of the song And You and I by Yes. Registers as 176418. So it's got quite a lot of highs, quite a lot of lows. And looky there, Rolling Stones' Beast of Burden has already moved to the point where its main score here, the one in the corner, is AD, and it could even go higher than that. And it's being done by variety in the texture of these peaks. I mean, I really could just remove the RMS at this stage, because it's not even doing anything. It's fun to look at, but there's not that much need for it. And that might be a thing to try before the weekend. I know I'm busy making it look pretty and all. Like it's got the... I'm not even sure that's helpful. The fact that it shows left and right, and people ask, what are the red and the green mean? I would have thought that red and green would mean left and right to people, but apparently not. And looky there, our hit record score is now all the way up to AB because we are measuring not only the loudness, but also the peak fluctuations, which are doing really well with this. This band is good at that. And then as we pull it to a stop, notice that where it says peak tone is keeping track of this stuff in here for you. The little red dots. And one thing I've noticed that it's quite interesting that with a lot of this music, these dots get all blended up. Like we've got green dots right down near the bottom, right up into the middle of the blue, and then the red dots are scattered all the way down because there's moments that are quiet and have a little high frequency sound going on in there. It's just like it's all been thrown into a blender. It's not simply sitting there with a line of blue dots through the middle. And this is a very effective sound, but it's most effective when they balance. And what you see, which we didn't have last week, is the peak tone bright 16%, dark 15%. I can now show that it balances. And I am tempted to try a thing. Let's be really audacious, and I want to see what this is going to be like. Here's the code. If you can't look at open source code, don't look at this. So here's where we do all of this drawing of stuff. I've been working at this for like 9 hours today. going a little more hard, this is actually the place where I can draw these things. I cannot actually draw anything below the vertical position of 400 because it simply doesn't draw anymore. If I could, I would label the 0 cross meter where the 2K and the 200 hertz and the 20 hertz go, but I cannot. There's no reason. It's supposed to be able to do that, it just won't. Go figure. I don't see anywhere where it would make it. I mean, it's able to draw a line. You can do G fill rect right down to as far as you might want to go, but you can't do draw text. And here we are looking at the these things. Yeah, well, this is one of the things I've always done, and it's good to do a little bit of that. So the difference between this here, where it says done with RMS chunk and sound density, and where it says draw gray to R point and then green to L, like I could simply comment that out and replace it with something else, because what we've got going on just below, it's drawing peaks, it's drawing dots for peaks, and then it's drawing this slew. And let's see now. It's still drawing peaks, but the thing is, there's another section. See, we're drawing those, and we're drawing those, and then somewhere in here, we're drawing that gray area. So I want to find where I did that. And I might be able to find it by looking for where it says juice color and then a color that's a light gray. It's not going to be there. And this is also, I think maybe I draw it before I draw the dots. See where it says peak, this and that and the other thing? Doesn't look as if I'm doing a good job of explaining what I'm doing. It is C++, but the parts that I program typically just sit around being C. And right now what I'm doing, apart from this other stuff, is finding where it's drawing not the peak dots. We don't want those at the moment, but the slew dots. And maybe it's it might be doing it in the other part. That's setting the color black, that's setting the color red. Neither of those are what I'm looking for. But guess what? I think I found it. Check it out. All of this other stuff could conceivably be replaced with just this. What we're looking at, and I'll separate this out a little bit. And I'll separate that out a little bit. You see right down at the bottom where it says G fill rect. That's where we're drawing those shapes. And all this other stuff is doing fancy things like outlining it in a black so you can see what the RMS is doing more clearly, and making it be different shades of darkness for how loud it gets. But the point here is RMS will take care of itself. the way to make intense sound here is to hit with the peaks as hard as you can. And rather than just clipping them all, or peak limiting them all, so that they're just a line, you want to be able to have them occupy a bunch of space. And I can more effectively demonstrate that by straight up, we'll comment a bunch of stuff out, but not this. It does need this. Let's copy and paste that. And then we've got this one up here, which is going to do the same thing. Copy and paste that. Nudge it a little bit until it behaves. Everything in here we can just get rid of. And I'll show you how. If you program in the C programming language and you do /*, everything is then commented */ and it turns the audio, or it turns the code back on again. And again, /*, turns everything off, */ turns everything back on. So now we are not drawing gray to the R point and then green to L or red to R. We're just picking the loudest section, and we're not making any special things with colors. We're not doing setting of the color. We don't have to have two separate amounts. We're just picking the loudest bit. We can set the color to be an even paler gray, 0.94. That's an even paler gray just to make the point. And then all we have to do is, the stuff with the filling the rect is doing almost exactly the same thing here as down here, but it's 200 minus h rather than 400 minus h, so we can simply duplicate this. And this is actually going to work. And we'll do it twice, because we do it for each of the channels. And then it goes 200 and 200. And then I would be able to delete all of this stuff with the fancy colors. But let's check and make sure that what's actually going on in here is interesting enough to justify this. Yeah, excuse me. So build. Now, when we have the Rolling Stones, one of the things about using the VST for this is that I can run it immediately and it doesn't need to restart the computer or anything. And here we are with the Rolling Stones, and now it is showing us only what's happening in the peaks. I could make the gray even fainter than that. I don't know, though. Like, it's cool to be able to kind of sort of see what's going on there. It does cover up the background lines, I know that. So working this way, working with peaks, what you want to do is look at the cloud of dots in here. That's what matters. The cloud of dots is what matters. RMS takes care of itself. And the point that I was making, as far as like loud music and where the energy goes, to get a really high score on this current version of the meter, what you do, I could even leave out the peaks entirely, although I would also have to remove the label that says RMS here. But that's an interesting thought. That's a bold move. You want me to do a bold move? we can just go full hog on this and get aggressive. Worth a try. Let's find out. So I think we might still use, or maybe not, H for something. So asterisk and, did that wrong. Asterisk and that. We will take out the asterisk and that for this. See, data A and data B are, and I do have to check to make sure this still works. That's the thing. But notice how I've got this asterisk at the end here. I can put one right here. Now the entire RMS is commented out. Let's see if it still works. Yeah, it's C++ and juice. You're entirely correct about that. The way it says juice colon is a definite tip-off. I don't mean to be too sassy, don't mind me. And now we have a peak meter. Oh, I forgot to take away the point where it says RMS. See, if you're just commenting out one line, you use 2 slashes, and that comments out just the one line. And we will build this. And then we're going to fire up the Rolling Stones because it says the build succeeded. And then after I do that, I'm going to play something else that is much more loud rock and roll kind of thing. If I can find it, I'll find something suitable. And now we have a peak only meter. Actually, you know what I could do is I could go and just play a loudinated track. It would be quite funny. And this kind of makes the point. You're looking to produce a pattern of energy that takes up a bunch of space in the top meter. The colors in the slew show you how bright or dark you're supposed to be. The zero cross meter has to do with bass. And in fact, the bass coming off of this old Rolling Stones record goes right down to 20 hertz. This line is 20 hertz. Some of the kicks are going lower than 20 hertz. But then the Rolling Stones could afford really good equipment. And this is like mid-70s. So this is the time period where you could get into that. Let's go look at more things. Now that we have this set up, I feel like maybe, I could do a 30 dB. That could be interesting. Shall we? Want to do that? Let's put in a 30 dB marking because I know exactly how that would be done. Because now you can see it, right? It doesn't get covered up by anything. And typically none of your peaks hit at below 30 dB because peaks are always louder than RMS, you remember. But that's kind of the point, isn't it? Let's continue. I can always get the old code off of GitHub because it's the previous version of this meter is downloadable just as it was, and that contains a copy of the old code. That's what using a source control system gives you. I haven't always been source control system guy, but it really sometimes hits the spot. Okay, so here's where we draw some of that stuff. And we're no longer drawing RMS because we're no longer even showing RMS. This is the opposite of the loudness meters that you might be used to. A radical move. I'm so happy with the fact that it's a radical move that I'm probably going to keep it. And then minus, what was it, 30 dB, because it's in 6 dB increments. And I probably don't need to do 36 because I don't think it'll fit. But our positioning here, see where the markings are being drawn here? There's also a set of markings for the slew, but slew doesn't really match what's happening. There's no real equivalent to the slew being that loud because you don't listen to the slew. The slew is just a part of the rest of the sound. Anywho, 24 dB markings at 150. Well, I'm drawing the letters at 140, not 150. And 18 dB markings at 130, but I'm drawing it at 120 because that made the subtract in minus 18 dB line up with the line that I was using, which I felt was appropriate. So instead of 165, and that would be drawing the letters over the, well, I'm now wondering whether maybe I should try to put in the 36 dB. You want to try to put in the 36 dB one too? Let's do it. If it looks ugly, I can just take it back out again. This is what this job is like. It's deciding which of these things are worth doing. And remember, it went 150 for 24 dB down, but the letter is drawn at 140 to make it line up. So instead of 165, we do 155. Instead of 175, we do 165. Those are now going to line up with the lines that we're drawing, but it might overlap once we get to 30 and 36. So let's try it and find out. Building. Build succeeded. And let's pull in something completely different. Burial, Archangel. I don't know quite how different this is, but it is at least going to show us, yeah, 30 and 36. You kind of can see where those are. I think maybe I'll be willing to live with it. It doesn't look great, but it's okay. And now as we draw this, we are looking at only the slews and only the peaks of Burial's Archangel. Archangel, off of the album Untrue. This is in fact a big successful track, although what's going to happen is it's going to be penalized by being so dark and bassy, because it is dubstep. It is extraordinarily dark and bassy. And you can still see the high frequency spikes. I had to go and edit that to make sure that the high frequency spikes still read as bright and contributed to bright peak tone. But what's going to happen with this is it tends to be so extremely bass heavy that it doesn't really qualify for your classic hit record sound. It's just pushing a little too hard. Also, you'll notice that all of a sudden, now that we've gotten really loud, look what's happening down here, a big fat nothing. That's what happens. And I can further demonstrate that by, maybe I'd better go and find another example. Here's other examples. This is a cool track. It is a Foo Fighters track. And you'll see what modern mixing and mastering does to this meter. And then I'll show you some of the other things that are possible to do. I'm warming to the idea of this peak-only display, particular because everything else only shows RMS and never shows you peaks. So this is the opposite kind of meter. Yeah. Well, no, it's gonna, you have no idea. Watch this. So remember, this is where your brightness and overbrightness happens. This is kind of loudness. This is where the modulation of peak energy happens. Now, I had a thing going on where it was like you should have at a maximum, if your clipping meters meet the RMS meter coming up, you're pushing it about as loud as you can. Except not. Because at that point, see how the energy is already showing up only in the top 6 dB. And now it's gone. Now it's fighting a good fight as far as trying to count, have something going on. But as far as the contrasts, all of that already happened and died. You can see in this bottom section where the hit record stuff, and this is fighting as hard as it can to be a hit record. I mean, it is literally a hit record. It's just in a different era that doesn't handle sound properly. And you see that this red line is the variety in the sound. We go into the chorus and everything absolutely dies. In fact, even the peak loudness died because we're not counting it's not able to register as loud peaks because it's only loud clips. So we generate a situation where it's doing its best to do its thing and is even pulling it off fairly well. I bet I can tell you why, too. Except for I'm going to have to stop it, and it's not easy to see. Look over here. Peak tone, bright 22%, loud 52%, dark 26%. As loud as this is, it's incredibly well balanced. It is really pushing the limit of how good something can sound when made to be this loud. But you're missing so much by doing that. So let's see, what else would be good? Source to digital. Here's a bunch of other stuff that can be investigated. For instance, some classic Skrillex. In this section, it's the intro, and it's already in the top 6 dB for peaks. And then it's already gone beyond the beyond, and it's a bit of a mess. So, like, don't make stuff this loud, please. It's annoying. You got your quiet section. The quiet section is trying to make things happen. And away we go again. So this meter is for not doing this. Everybody else's meters are for doing this with, but I think you'll find that you have to work so hard to make something actually sound good at these levels, like the Foo Fighters was doing. And so the idea is like, yeah, maybe don't do that. Do like deadmau5. deadmau5's track Telemis Communications does quite well for itself. It's off of a later deadmau5 album. but he just does whatever he wants. And so he did a song that is spacious, dynamic, and with a lot of variations going on. It's building up to singing. What, the Skrillex? I mean, technically we could try. I don't know, I want to do variety of things rather than just only play Skrillex tracks. But look at what the Deadmau5 track is doing. You can't hear all that much of it, granted, but you'd probably just see a line of blue dots at the top of the peak meter, yeah. Because you can dial it back just enough to not invoke the red lines. It's not going to help you very much as far as having variety in the sound, though. Whereas this, the peak loudness is staying down at DA level. But look at the patterns we're seeing. We've got these little clouds of energy. It'll tend to go loud for the compressed vocals. These blue spots tend to be vocals. And then the slew is very interesting. We've got some of these gray and black spikes, which are brightness that's getting exaggerated. But peak tone, bright 16%, loud 48%, dark 35%. I know it feels weird without the RMS. I think that's why I'm going to keep it this way. It is giving you a picture of what this is actually about. And you know, I can throw on another example. Boop. I'm looking at something right now. Or I was, and then I forgot it. Yeah, I'm definitely looking at something that I saw on the screen, and I'm trying to think of what it was. I thought I saw something, I was like, oh my god, this is a great example of what I was talking about. Let's see. What could it have been? Oh, Beatles. Everybody's got something to hide, except for me and my monkey. Off the White Album. Watch what this does. A bunch of loud noises, yes. This one's going to go for all bright, no dark. And you can see that when the Beatles are blasting away like this, all of their energy is in the top 12 dB, with very few exceptions. Only for a moment do you get little peaks down here. And this is the stuff that will cause, you can see in the, here, I'll stop it. Watch. The Beatles are cranking away with fire bell and all manner of stuff and all their amps, and they're just blasting. And then they pause. They go do thump 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 thump. That's the drums right there. The part where it got a little quieter. And because there were sounds in these bins, the peak fluctuation meter, the peak novelty meter, maybe I should be calling it novelty, it suddenly spikes up. It spikes up because it got quieter. Because something's happening down here after a long period without anything happening. Similarly to where it starts off, and then as you burst into the song, the novelty jumps up because, oh wow, they're loud. That seems new. And then we get used to it. And this red line, it settles down a little bit. I keep track of what the peak is. That is the peak fluctuations AF startling. That would be somewhat after the and then the scream is probably what causes this additional burst of novelty, because loud vocalizations, new instruments entering, new harmonies entering, all of that kind of stuff can push things into a new dynamic range or change the pattern that you're seeing. There just needs to be enough space in there so that it drops down into here, it lights up these bins. Maybe it doesn't have to light up all the very quietest ones, but that's also why certain studio tracks, or let me show you something else too. This is interesting. Owner of a Lonely Heart. And this is a Trevor Horn production, and there's an interesting thing to be observed about the Trevor Horn production. It's the same for this, and it's the same for Leave It. For a lot of the big producers, and I need to check some of the Mutt Lange stuff to see whether it's doing it as well. When they start doing their thing, and also notice the range Trevor Horn's mix covers. He's got stuff going all the way down to 36 dB down. There's that much space in the mix. That's tricky to do. And as you see, the hit record thing has pegged itself at like AC, although it seems to have maxed out. I have some adjustments to do maybe, which is higher than the last time I rated it. This was a ginormous hit. I'm trying to work out ways to identify it. There we go, AA. So this is a gold standard, AA rated, top tier, massive hit. And it was. This launched Yes in the 80s. And this is what the peak energy looks like and what the slew energy looks like. And you take a look at the other sections, our peak loudness is still relaxed. That means the sound goes right down to here a lot of the time. We've also got a really good distribution of these peaks, which is what I think is interesting to watch for. Like, you watch for how this is lighting up the dots. We've already gotten to AA, so we already have a gold standard, totally awesome hit. I'm comfortable with considering this one of the AA hits. I think that's correct. It's doing it on the back of loudness of CF and a peak fluctuations, I should call it novelty, I really should, of contrasts. I have a whole set of information about that, like it's down here. So here's what the peak stuff is about. It goes contrasts, startling for really high levels, variations for less dynamic than contrasts, and then evolving for less, and steady for less, and stable for the least variation. Notice what's happening over the length of the track. It's doing this peak tone calculating over everything since the beginning. And notice what's happening up here where it says peak tone. Check it out. Trevor Horn mix, Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes, massive hit. When you analyze it this way, notice at this solo section there's a lot of red up here. The slew is bright. It's making bright sounds. But across the entire track, 20% bright, 20% dark, perfectly balanced. Perfectly balanced. That's not an accident. Not only that, I think that's something that we can attempt to do on purpose. You don't have to just guess about it. And that it'll help in getting sounds. Like, how many times have I mixed something and then made it way too bright and gone later and been like, what was I even doing? And this can tell me. This can tell me whether I'm doing that or not, or whether I've got so much in the extreme low bass that it's coming across too dark. And a classic example of that kind of thing if I can find it. I guess I have to scroll a little farther. Chic, Le Freak. Heard through Content ID so that I can play my stream. Now, this song doesn't change all that much over the extent. It's pretty much just settling into its groove. There's basically a chorus, but it's basically sitting around doing this. But look at what the peak energy is doing. We've got a total cloud here that's filling up the entire space very evenly. That's what you want to look for. We've also got brightness, where the brightness is able to poke right through, and we've got the occasional little bursts of too bright with the black spikes there. You can get away with a lot of that stuff, though. And already we have made it to a score of AF for this classic, one of Chic's biggest disco hits ever. And this is what it looks like when you look only at the peaks and the slews and the zero crosses. It's doing these clouds. You don't see that when you just look at the RMS loudness and stuff. Doesn't tell you any of this. This is what I was shooting for when I was trying to get all this up and working. To be able to measure this kind of stuff and not be doing a personal judgment call on it. I shouldn't have to just go, well, that sounds more dynamic. That's how stuff is supposed to be. I don't like it when it's all loudinated and it doesn't sound dynamic anymore. I should be able to show it, measure it. And so we ignore RMS. We ignore RMS completely, and we're looking only at peak. And when we do that, a pattern emerges. Excuse me. And yeah, we have got so many things to play with here that it's probably a perfectly fine time for me to, while leaving this playing, let's go and lock in that stuff. I'm satisfied with these choices. This is all commented out. It can just go away. I think I need to keep track of RMS for some other reasons. I think it enters in. Yeah, it does. The hype and vibe enter in. They do read and count that. But the stuff that I just did, yeah, I don't need. This exists in a previous version as a commented out thing. We can also comment out this bit where it says RMS because we are no longer paying the slightest attention to RMS. Haha. And we've got peak, we've got slew, we've got zero cross. And tighten up a little bit of the space. It is all the more efficient as we go. And this is no longer a thing. I removed that. And let's see. Here's the part about the bins that I was talking about. And yeah, novelty. Novelty is a better word for what I'm doing than fluctuations. What even is fluctuations? I probably don't need the leading space. And so the novelty can be stable, steady, evolving, variations, contrasts, or startling. And there's lots of extra room for startling. Let's add another thing just in case. So FEDCBA, FEDCBA, and then a little bit more. So if you manage to make a novelty that is so completely over the top, it will actually say something else. You probably will never get there. But if it goes completely off the charts in a way that breaks stuff, you can at least say absurd and ridiculous. And then peak loudness. This is how loud these peaks generally will go. So it goes starting from quiet to spacious to relaxed. It's in 4s instead of 5s, this one. I was looking at the songs that rated these things and describing them as best I could. I am putting the peak loudness of CD through CA, and I'm calling it popular just so that it will remind people of positive things. It is indeed a popular density for sounds. Then strong is popular but more so. Loud is, this is getting aggressive, we're probably losing variety, we're probably losing novelty. And then aggro is beyond loud. And then the peak tones go here. And then that final grade. And then we draw the final grade. Let's draw it even bigger. We'll go from 29 to 32. We're also drawing one in white underneath the one in black so that if it's all muddied up with a bunch of stuff in the way, you can still kind of see it. And this is all the small print. And that's designed so that you can also see it reasonably well by having a white version put underneath it. Back to the final score for Chic Le Freak, and that was an AF total. And we can see all this specklediness turns out to come from these measurements. So this cleaned this up now. This only has the relevant information in it now. And I have still not worked out what's causing this. It's like it fails to register the new information, and I don't know why it periodically fails, but you get enough of a gist of what it's doing that I'm willing to be content with that. David Chapman, I have already got rid of the RMS because so much of what this meter does depends upon the peak that we're just going whole hog so that you can see the peak most undistractedly. And see, we'll quit out of here and we will, don't mind me tightening up a line. Hit build, and build succeeded to the point, I think, where I can quit out of there and then look at some different things. Like this is interesting. Here's a Depeche Mode track that is from an old 80s CD. So this is a digital track off of a CD, but you can see that it is not peak limited. It's not loudinated. Let's see what this does. We should put this in the other list, honestly. I should put all of these in the other list. I remember last time I looked at these, what happened is this became one of the loudest tracks I had. And we'll fire it off. That is that noise, which is a continuing noise. It's in stereo. You're seeing the left and the right. And they're both shrieking loud noises, perfectly balanced between brightness and darkness. And off we go. 80s Depeche Mode going for a loud, intense tone without loudnating. And what they're doing is causing the peak tone to be bright 7%, loud 89%, and dark 3%. That's pushing it. This is an astonishing result. What I wonder is how it's going to start measuring. Because that loudness is going to continue to rise. We're just hitting with so much sonorous, penetrating loud noise. It's weird how well they do that on this album. They could do with a little more bass, I'll just say. They could do with like about 5% more bass, honestly. Just let a little of that green dots in here where the slew is. Just fill in a little bit more bass in this mix and it would be the happier for it. But yeah, and we see in the measurements that the loudness is pushing for as loud as we can get, even without ever clipping the mix bus. You can see where all the peaks are, and without actually clipping, without actually ever going up to peak, it's still moving around a little bit. But this is even better of an example than the 60s stuff I was thinking about, as far as demonstrating what happens when all of your sound is just loudness. There's plenty of other Depeche Mode that acts very differently from this, but this is an interesting thing to observe. And now we've gone into a quieter section, and immediately it's opened up completely. But then as soon as Dave Gaines starts singing, he's belting and he's taking up all the space up here, and so most of that variation goes away. That's the thing. The meter does trigger on loud, intense, sonorous peaks, but when you push it this hard, even without loudnating, you kind of see what happens. Novelty is having these dots all through here. Novelty is having dots everywhere. This is not having dots everywhere. This is having dots in this narrow little band up here where it's loudest. And it's a neat sound. But this is not necessarily a, success for the ages sound. It's kind of dated. I think it's like digital reverb and compression and stuff. It might not be peak limited, but it's a complete sausage. And that's the price you pay. That said, it's managed to get right up to a level of CC, and rightly so, I think, because it is doing that well as far as being exciting. However, I think once it fades, we're going to see the red line spike back up again, or maybe not. I stand corrected. I guess it didn't. So, Depeche Mode album from CD being really, really loud. Ooh, here's a different album. We've got a variety of albums in here. This is from a classic synth pop track. This is Enjoy the Silence. You're going to see a completely different behavior here, even though it's also off of a CD rather than a vinyl album. You have to go and look for the original CDs when they come out for this. It's like the original vinyl mix. And this is Violator. This is the album Violator. This is when they really, really, really blew up. Observe the behaviors that we're studying here. We've got the peaks pretty much all entirely sitting between -6 and -12. Could do with maybe a little more variety. It could also do with quieter sections, but that's largely because we've got a lot of reverb in here. And that's fine. They've got a sort of continuing sound going on. There will be sections where it drops back and gets quieter and lights up some of this other stuff. But the really interesting thing is to look at what's going on in the slew meter. Because we've got another one of those things where they're doing this wide range sound that has extremely bright peaks and extremely dark peaks. And they're sitting pretty optimally. I feel like when it does this, when all the red dots are over the blue dots and all the green dots are under the blue dots, that's like your hi-fi style sound. Whereas a more sort of mixed up gumbo type sound would be Rolling Stones or Chic, where it's all blended together. And that's usually being done by a more open dynamic mix with less reverb sitting around in it. Depeche Mode do have a tendency of sitting with a lot of reverb. And also notice that the meter has correctly identified this is one of their big hits. It's rating this as higher than the previous one. It's rating this as a BE, even though it's not even like it's off of a vinyl record or anything. It's off of a CD and it's still doing perfectly fine for itself. My hope is that working with this kind of stuff, you can look at readings like this, read the information, interpret it, and make mixed decisions that will literally help you go in these directions with it. Like, it's impossible to be using this meter and not notice that you've got everything running kind of loud and you're losing everything in the bottom section of the peak meter. You might want to do that, but you're going to have to work with it and make sure that it works. And you can do things like arrangement as well. Yeah, excuse me. I'm going to finish up in about 8 minutes. It's gone a little longer than previous weeks, but my energy for the live streams has been kind of dwindling. But on the other hand, look at the work I'm doing. So it is a combination of things, to be sure. And then the vocal. And the vocal fills up all of this kind of stuff. Also notice that the reverb is very bright. They might have even done the Dolby trick with it. That reverb is just all brights. No darks, no fullness. And it's at a quite loud level too. Requests for other songs to investigate? I'm going to leave the source digital alone. And I tell you what, there's another thing that I must do. Give me a second and see whether I can't do this properly. I'm going to be smart about it. See where this says untitled folder? Option drag. I would like to, if it'll let me. Oh God, that's not what I meant to do at all. Well, we can but try. See, this is why I'm doing this kind of thing, is because I know I'm not up to doing it properly. So let's try that again. This is now a copy of that. We're going to throw away all that previous work, and I need to go through and do more than 1,000 songs. There might be a way of doing this in Reaper where it goes through them faster, because I feel like the meter worked at accelerated speed when I ran it in Reaper's render. So I'd probably be able to do that. Here's our final thing. I've always used Macs and I like them. And I am also running an M1 Ultra with 128 gigs of RAM, so it is pretty good at doing some of its Mac-y things. It is optimized for being what it is. However, I also find the need to get into Terminal, and that's what we're about to do. Because, let's see now, I need to learn to do this. So let's see. Top. Now we should be in this folder, LSA. And sure enough, we see those things. Now I'm going to do the terminal command, which is to take all that stuff away. Let's see whether I can do it correctly. So firstly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 characters. So if I take this, hopefully it won't just run. It did not just run. And tell it to be F12 and run that, you should see in untitled folder that all of that other stuff will just disappear. I'm going to go and erase a week of work by doing the same thing. CD ... is go to the parent folder. To last batch. Now we're in the underlying folder, having tested the thing and found out that it worked. I could screw up a whole bunch of things on my computer this way. This is terminal. This is full power. Boop. And now I don't need terminal or this test folder any longer. Yay for terminal. Oh, let's look at some of the things that are classic. Let's look at Back in Black on the new meter. Would you like to see what Back in Black looks like? Let's literally do that. We won't be able to hear much of it, mind you. But I'm very curious as to what Mottlange's balance between bright peaks and dark peaks is. And you notice one thing right off the bat is we are using the full range all the way down to minus 36 dB in the middle of them blasting away. I'm not sure if I have any All Things Must Pass. I have it. My problem is it is severely scratched and damaged, so I'm not able to get a copy of it cleanly. So I guess what Mottlange's sound is it's equal amounts of bright and loud and no dark. That doesn't actually do him any favors with this version of the meter, but it's a sound. You can pretty well see what he's doing there. And we can even compare it against other things like Def Leppard, which is going to behave very similarly. But yeah, interestingly, you can see the occasional bits of dark underneath everything here. And on the zero cross meter, you can see the kick drum. It's not registering as though anything is being dark peaks, but you can see the kick drum here. It's showing up in the zero cross meter. So that matters. Oh, and you're quite welcome. You know, if you know about Linux, if you can find out how my compile for Raspberry Pi could support 64-bit as well as 32, because I'm compiling literally on a Raspberry Pi, but apparently it doesn't work for everybody. Yeah, I know, right? Well, it's a Muttlange mix. What do you want? And the amount of loud they're uncorking here is probably going to give it a little bit more. But yeah, I guess welcome to the 80s. This is the kind of 80s thing. Although it's understandable that it's leaning on loud more than anything else. Note where it says peak loudness CA for popular. This is a popular loudness density for music to be. In fact, this could be my first measured and marked down track. And I can bounce around a little bit, but then I'm going to go and have dinner. Peak loudness went to BF or strong. See, the way this works is it does a lot better if it can balance that out with some low bass. But some of this stuff, you know, they would be mixing them on Oratones. They would be mixing this stuff for like AM radios. Maybe not AM radios at this stage, but a fair bit of this 80s stuff didn't attempt to get bass. Unlike a lot of the 70s stuff. Some of the 70s stuff is completely in the opposite direction. I can show you some of that. In fact, I'm going to let it play all the way through so that I can write down the result. And yeah, you could take your rock track and make it match this behavior, and then you would have a black and black AC/DC sounding kind of thing. You'd have to match the behavior. That's both in the novelty, in the loudness, and in the amounts of peak tone. But this is giving you the formula. It is giving you the formula. You can see where everything has to sit. And then you use plugins and stuff to force it to be in those places, and you're good. So yeah, that was CF. It's my first measurement for the new meter. Yay. Weirdly, this Captain Beefheart track has double spaces in here. It's a typo. Goodbye. So here's a contrast. Fleetwood Mac. Well, hang on a second. Where's... Oh, I didn't do it yet. That's why. Here's all the ones that I haven't even gotten around to. There's 607 of those. I can put them all back into one big list now. But rather than do that right away, I'm going to drag Sentimental Lady over into this one. Check out how dark this is. We sort of get it started. The surface noise is making a little bit of crackle there. Now, one of the interesting things about this is the extreme lack of variation here. The only way this covers a range is by going from louder to quieter, like a bass going boom. And so it starts out up here and then it decays. And part of that sound is like the result of tracks being recorded on tape machines. You can see how absurdly dark it is. There's almost no brightness in there. It's just all these green dots. And as we kick into the chorus, it lights up a little bit. Some stuff is happening. But it's contained in this really tight little band. And that's because it's recorded to tape, and a lot of the elements are kind of saturated. It's like using that, the tape slam, the tape saturation will start giving you this result. Like that bass note, these guitars. They're not bright and distorted or anything. They're very dark and bassy. It almost acts like heavily overbiased, honestly. And you see everything is being restricted into this narrow band, which hurts its score. And that is also something that could be imitated if you wanted to imitate it by making it do this stuff, intentionally trying to duplicate this behavior. If you really wanted old Fleetwood Mac, Sentimental Lady, you manipulate your digital mix, which will be far from this. A digital mix is going to be so far from this it's not even funny. But you force it to be in this zone to get this sound, if it is the sound that you want. And a lot of that you can see from the restriction of the peaks, that there's tape saturation going on. You just don't have the headroom. It's being cut to tape kind of hot for probably noise reasons. But it's so dark that you'd never hear noise anyhow. And yeah, it's a very distinct sound. It's the farthest thing that you would ever get from a native digital audio workstation mix. And yet, if you can match this pattern with the digital mix, you also get the sound. Kind of fun. And it's a very mellow track. This is the mellowest imaginable track. Unbelievably so. I'm going to let this track finish up so that I can label it as most likely CF. It's probably not going any higher than that. And then once I've done that, I'm going to keep the two tracks that I've just labeled and move the other ones back to the other folder. And I am probably ready to put this out this weekend. I think these changes... I really do have to stop streaming. I think these changes sufficiently clarify what this is about that it's worth doing the new version. I think we got there. And away we go. We ended up with 3% bright, 57% loud, and 39% dark, which is not the most dark I've ever seen. Like stuff off of ZZ Top's Tres Hombres is overwhelmingly dark. But yeah. CF. I can't believe hundreds and hundreds of tracks that I did where I had to remember 3 pairs of letters and write them down. And instead, now what we're doing is taking all of this stuff and taking all of these things. Why is it doesn't have a leading space? That's why. If it has a leading space, it'll zip back to its appropriate place. See, there's Waiting Jesus and Lagrange. That's from Tres Hombres. That's incredibly dark. Apparently I have Wave for Same Old Song and Dance and Train Kept a Rollin', and I don't even know why that is. That's crazy. No matter. And I will put out this version of the meter by Saturday and have a video explaining what it does this coming weekend. And I have established that AC/DC's Back in Black and Fleetwood Mac's Sentimental Lady are the same thing, or at least they both rate at CF. And I have 1,087 songs to work my way through. No real win for that. Anyway, it's better than copying 3 pairs of letters, because I would also have to type in the space, dash space. And I'm going to call that a day. Here is my notes, which I use to dial in that bright and dark offset thing where if stuff is really out of balance. In AC/DC's case, it's over bright. In Fleetwood Mac's case, it's over dark. I wrote all these things down, and I don't need this anymore. So, hey, so much for those notes. And I'll talk to you later. And you will see the new version come out this weekend. And I'll do a video on it and everything. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.